There are 3 Maggoth riders in the Age of Sigmar that we know of, each one of them a character, and each one of them is incredibly cool. There's Orgoth's Demon Spew, Morbidex's Twiceborn, and Bloeb Rotspawned. Now, I've been requested to do lore videos on each one of them at different points, but the fact of the matter is there's not a lot of lore on them individually. So I'm going to do one video that covers all 3, because here's the thing. You might be disappointed that they're not getting a dedicated video, but the fact of the matter is, each one of their stories is fairly small, but when you put them together and have an understanding of what the champions of Nurgle who ride the Maggoths are like, together they form a far more fascinating picture of Nurgle and his champions. Now, this kit can build one of these 3 options, and it was released during the End Times, where they got a little bit of lore blurb inside I believe it was the End Times Clotkin book. I'm not quite sure, don't hold me to that. It's been a long time. And they've been rehashed in the Maggotkin of Nurgle book, so what we're going to do is kind of meld the 2 together and knock these out. So the first guy we're going to talk about is Orgoth's Demon Spew. Now, according to the Old World lore, he's the only one that has the kind of a very stark difference. In the Old World, he was a king of a small village near the opening to a realm of chaos. And there was just warp energy pounding over this village and this region his entire lifespan. This did a few things for him. Namely, it increased his lifespan very unnaturally. He lived a very long time. And somehow all of that energy, that chaos warp energy, made him somewhere between a man and a demon, but not quite either one. He could walk in the realm of chaos, in particularly Nurgle's realm in his garden, but he couldn't interact with it. He couldn't breathe it in. He couldn't fully experience it. He didn't really belong in the world of men, but he didn't really belong in the chaos realm either. And as you can imagine, this extremely frustrating position of not really belonging anywhere. Now, the AOS lore, the little blurb that we get in the Maggotkin and Nurgle book, has kind of a vague reference to a witch being the reason for this kind of halfway between point, but he is still in the same place where he's halfway between being a demon and a human. And above all else, Orgoth seeks to ascend to full demonhood. He must frequently go through the realm of Nurgle, just kind of walking and exploring and trying to find a place where he belongs. On one of these outages, he finds a pair of huge axes that are from the realm of chaos, but are not necessarily demonic weapons. There's not like a spirit of a demon necessarily bound into them. And as such, he has become a massive champion of Nurgle, seeking to impress his god for the sole purpose of attaining full demonhood. And to show his gratitude, Nurgle has blessed him quite a bit. He got the axes, which of course I already mentioned. He got several mutations, kind of, again, further increasing his lifespan and just his outright power. And his latest gift has been Whippermaw, which is the name of the Maggoth that he rides into battle. And I like this guy very simply because we've never seen anyone who's kind of in this frustrated halfway between man and demon position before. We've seen people who, like Korgus Kull with the Khorne Bloodbound, who's just near the point of ascension, and so his body is warping and changing slowly. But no one who's just kind of naturally came into this stuck position and has to work extremely hard to be one or the other. And that makes him very, very unique. And he is very different from our next Maggoth Lord, who is Morbidex's Twiceborn. Now, he was actually born by the name of Morbidex's Fireborn, and he was born into a unaligned chaos tribe, these kind of worshippers, kind of like we would say pagan worshippers of all the chaos gods. And during the time of being born, his village was on fire. We don't know, there's no information given. We don't know if it was a natural fire, like an accident, or if he was being attacked by something. But these flames burned him very, very badly when he was still just a baby. And it's said repeatedly that this did not help his looks. Apparently, it must have been very disfiguring to him. But he grew up very cunning and very, very strong, and actually earned his place as the chieftain of this tribe when he got older. Now, as the teachings of this unaligned chaos tribe went, they'd often associated Tzeentch with flames. So he was kind of like, that was kind of his iconography. And so Morbidex's Fireborn sought a little revenge for all the disfigurement and the pain that has caused him his entire life. So, knowing kind of how the gods vaguely operate in this tribe, who's the enemy of Tzeentch? Well, it's Nurgle. And so he began to seek out the favor of Nurgle to get revenge on Tzeentch, who he perceived to be the source of the fire that burned him as a child. Now, he went to a place where he knew that there was a weak opening between the mortal realm and the Chaos Realm, so he could somehow commune with Nurgle. So he starts climbing this huge mountain to get there. And wouldn't you know it, instead of him going to Nurgle, Nurgle came to him in a very strange and unique way. While he's climbing, there was an avalanche, but there wasn't any snow. It was Nurglings. Hundreds and hundreds of Nurglings came bounding down the edge of the mountain, washed him down, and when he became conscious at the bottom of the thing, he was being suffocated by a horde of Nurglings. Now he's pinned there. He's likely going to die because of this. And then one of the Nurglings kind of squirms up in front of him and asks him a riddle that he heard when he was a child. Morbidex, like I said, being very cunning and very intelligent, was able to answer it correctly. And so this Nurgling that he answered correctly went underneath him and started pushing up towards freedom. And then another Nurgling came and asked him another riddle, and he got it right. And then this one went to the bottom and pushed up. And so he began to play this game where every riddle he answered correctly, the Nurglings would push him up towards freedom. And then once he answered one wrong, it would somehow infect him and warp his body. Now, we're not given a timeline for how long he was pinned, but it must have been an extensive amount of time. These are hundreds and hundreds of Nurglings that are suffocating him. And of all their questions, he only got 3 wrong. And at that point, he was just close enough to the top to barrel through. And when he came out of this pit of Nurglings, he looks exactly the way he looks now. He has a Nurgling, very, very Nurgling-like face, one of his arms, and particularly his gut, kind of the general shape of him, which, I might add, accounts for the 3 answers that he got wrong. And with that, he attained exactly what he wanted. He wanted the favor of Nurgle for the sole purpose of going and hunting out Tzeentch. Now, of course, Nurgle can send any of his champions to do any myriad of battles, not just against Tzeentch, but this is a case where someone sought something out and achieved it. What's notable about him is that he is very, very Nurgling focused. One of the few things in the army that really focuses on the unit of Nurglings. And both of those are very different from our last Maggoth lord named Bloab Rotspawned. Now this one's very interesting. He's a very largely unremarkable child, meaning there's no grandiose backstory about becoming the chieftain or some massive war thing. He's not half demon from childhood. He's just a normal dude. But he's a dude with a very bad fascination, and that is hurting lesser creatures. When he was a child, he'd rip off the legs of bugs and spiders and wings off flies. And when he got into adulthood, he would kind of gut small critters. He just had a fascination with just hurting things. And this is where we learned something about Nurgle. See, he was very, very frustrated with this person because Nurgle values all life. And so how does Nurgle teach someone a lesson? Well, one night Bloab was sleeping in a cave. He was out traveling, and Nurgle sent a huge swarm of demon flies. And while he was sleeping, these demon flies burrowed into Bloab's mouth and nose and left a bunch of eggs. And he woke up writhing in pain because these eggs instantly burst and started basically eating him from the inside out. Now, when Bloab left the cave, he was something very, very different from what walked in. Basically now, he's an empty sack of skin with a swarm of bugs inside of him. What's fascinating is that he is the swarm and the swarm is him, meaning people often see this form of a person sitting on the Maggoth. They don't realize that the flies buzzing around him, that's actually him. It's just the parts of him that have come out of his own skin. So he is a living swarm of bugs that resides in this empty flesh sack that used to be his former body. And as you can imagine, if a god decides to smite you in such a horrific way, it's a very humbling experience. And so I'm pretty sure we're not really told why he goes from that point of not being a Nurgle follower, being totally smitten by him, and then suddenly becoming a Chaos Champion. My assumption is that humbling effect made you do, you're looking for recompense. You want to make up for the things that you've done. And so maybe that's why he became this awesome Nurgle Lord. Now, he actually did show up in the Rumgate Wars. He was struck down by Tornus, but as the Maggotkin book very clearly points out, no one can truly kill the swarm, meaning as long as there's at least some bug left alive, Bloab still exists. And that's really all the lore we get for all 3 of the guys combined. Now, again, that's not a whole lot to go on, but they are extremely interesting, and we're going to talk about why. The things I want to harp on is just how different each one of these characters is. Let's start with a quick overview of Orgots, where he was born into a crummy position of being half human, half demon, so to speak, and he is desperately trying to ascend to demonhood, much like most, or just nearly every Chaos Champion wants to do. They all want to be a Chaos Demon, So you have that very traditional Chaos Champion aspect. His upbringing was very unique amongst all AOS lore in terms of the half-human, half-demon thing. But other than that, very stereotypical Chaos Champion. Then you look at Morbidex Twiceborn, who has always been a Chaos guy, right, because his tribe was an unaligned Chaos thing. But this is interesting because rather than just trying to conquer things for Nurgle or ascend to anywhere, he just wants revenge on Tzeentch because he perceives Tzeentch as being the reason for his scars initially. Never minding the fact that now Nurgle is the one who's mutated him into his current ugly form. No, he still wants revenge on Tzeentch. But he isn't unique because of the three, he certainly has the most kind of the fun personality that Nurglings tend to imbue, that kind of playful mirth kind of thing. So of the three, he's the most, I would say, quote-unquote, Nurgle-y in personality. And then you have Blow-Up Rotsbond, who, this is one's really interesting because we don't know what his, we'll say, religious beliefs were as a child. We just know he wasn't really a great guy. He was kind of a turd when it came to hurting smaller animals, and became a Chaos Champion totally against his own will. I mean, this was a punishment rather than a blessing. Right, with the first guy, it just kind of happened the way he was born. With Twiceborn, it was a blessing, right? He sought Nurgle, and Nurgle sought him back and gave him exactly what he wanted. But with Bloab, it's very, very different. This was a punishment that somehow turned into him becoming a champion. And really what you get is this full spectrum of starting on one end with the first story saying, I want to be this way. Twiceborn not knowing what he's asking for, what the favor of Nurgle really looks like, because it just mutated him more than he already was and deformed him more than he already was. And then Blow Up on the opposite end, who didn't want this at all. And yet, despite that, these all come from vastly different backgrounds and different motivations and perceived strengths and weaknesses, but they're all such highly regarded champions in Nurgle that they've all been blessed with kind of the pinnacle of beasts, which is the Maggoth. And why this is so cool is I love seeing such a diverse array of motivations and personalities, because it used to be Chaos was very like one-dimensional in the old world. I mean, not necessarily like towards the end, but definitely in the older fiction, because I've been reading these books for a long time. You know, Chaos guys like to do bad things because that's what they do, right? Very twisty mustache, you know, evil for the sake of evil. But when you start taking people in, we'll say, comparable stature, meaning they're all Chaos Lords who have all been given the same gift of a Maggoth, which means they're all in very high esteem, but they come from such different directions to achieve that. That's when really interesting narratives start to happen. A army led by Bloab is vastly different than an army led by Morbidex. And not just because of rules, because of temperament. One is this way because he was punished. The other one is this way because he was searching for something and found it. One is very dour, one's very mirthful. Like, these characters in these armies are going to look different, despite the fact that they're functionally doing the same thing and Nurgle is equally pleased with them. Also interesting to point out that they come from, we'll say, their backgrounds even a little different, meaning that the first two were, you know, they were renowned people within their tribes. Blowout was a nobody, but he is a wizard, which is very interesting, that he is the only one of them who's a true wizard in the sense of, like, this is what he does, right? He identifies so strongly with that as well. And the kind of armies you can make based off these guys is really quite incredible. For something like Demon Spew, I would definitely kind of picture more of a immortal Nurgle army, just because that's kind of like, he seems to kind of be straddling that line, and I would love an army that's also straddling that line of, you know, being human, but super achieving something more, like the typical Chaos Warrior that we've seen before, and I think that definitely fits him. You go down to Morbidex Twiceborn, and he definitely fits into an army that has a lot more demon influence. Those Nurglings, it's built into his rules, yeah, but it's also built into his look and his lore. I mean, it's just what he does. He wants to bring the demons forward. And you go to Blow Up Rotsbond, and he kind of works, I think, kind of as a good median. You know, he's not quite human. Again, he is the swarm, and the swarm is him. I think in terms of like a human army versus a full demon army, he's definitely sits in that nice sweet spot in the middle, where either one of those makes sense, which is great. I love that these guys, between their lore and their rules and kind of where they aesthetically fit in things, they really are this fantastic spectrum between mortal armies and demons. Partially because of the gifts that they've been given, and also because the outrageously cool looking models that they ride upon, the Maggoths, help them kind of blend in with the monster aesthetic of the demons. But also, they're riders, so they kind of blend in well with the mortal aspect. It really does a great job of harmonizing the two. And folks, those are my thoughts on the Maggoth Lords of Nurgle. Again, it's one kit with a lot of possibilities in it. I did my best this episode to kind of cut down the intro in the beginning. I think I'm going to start doing that going forward and leave some channel announcements and junk towards the end here. As you know, this is day 3 of Nurgle week, and tomorrow we're going to be diving into how to get started with a Maggotkin army and the great launch points that Games Workshop has given us in the Demons, Slaves to Darkness, and even the Clan Pestilence book, and we're looking at kind of the value at each one of those. If you have an Age of Sigmar lore question you would like answered, go ahead, click subscribe, and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single comment and respond to as many as I possibly can. And I saved them all. We're going to get back to them as soon as my little Nurgle week is all over with. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.